Welcome to Legal Talk right here on eRadio with Hahn and Hahn attorneys. Today, a very interesting and serious topic: how to prevent fraud within your business, the red flags to look out for. Just this week, we saw that at a Northwest University, there was a professor who appeared in the Mamabatu Magistrates Court on Monday on charges of fraud and money laundering. She allegedly submitted fake invoices to the university, and now she's facing 12 counts of fraud and 11 of money laundering, and it looks like it's $500,000 rand that she actually stole from her employer, or allegedly stole from her employer. So fraud is all over businesses, universities, you name it. Today, Jaco Hamman of Hahn and Hahn attorneys is telling us more about it. Jaco, hello and welcome.
Hi, Ian. Welcome. Nice chatting to you again.
Yes, nice talking to you again. It's been a while, eh? I've had all your colleagues and everybody in the firm, but haven't spoken to you in ages.
Yeah, no, for sure. Luckily, they are so competent that I, with an open and a happy heart, pass them on to you to talk to you and the listeners as well.
No, they're great. I'm enjoying them. Jaco, let's ask the question: is it really possible to prevent fraud within your business? I mean, it to me it feels like it's inevitable.
Well, Ian, I suppose to answer the question is similar to the question on whether you can really prevent somebody from breaking into your property. And the answer to both of these questions is that probably not. However, you need to make it as difficult as possible for any would-be thief or then fraudster. And in the case of fraud, to try and minimize one's losses. And this one can definitely do. And of course, this is the purpose of today's talk.
So, Jaco, what would you say creates the scenarios that ultimately lead to fraud?
That's a very good question, Ian. And by realizing that these scenarios exist, one can really start looking out for some red flags, which we will be discussing in more detail later. Now, in forensic accounting or in forensic investigations, we talk about the fraud triangle. Now, this fraud triangle was developed by Dr. Donald Tracy, where he describes 3 conditions that are commonly found when fraud occurs. And if you've got these 3 conditions, then it's inevitable that it will happen. So the one is incentive or pressure. Now, this just means that the fraudster has to or wants to commit the fraud. For example, personal gain, keeping up with the Joneses. Now, there's a lot of people that want to live above their means, and how do you do that? Well, you do it by committing fraud and stealing the money. So that's the sort of the incentive that the person needs. The other one is pressure to keep up with your living expenses. Now, the cost of electricity rising rapidly, and the recent interest rate hikes that we saw last week and increase in food prices, it becomes more and more difficult for the average man to have money to keep up. Now, that's sort of the incentive that is needed. So if that incentive is there and you get the other two sides of the triangle, which we'll get to, then you know you've got big problems. And then lastly, having enough money for an addiction like gambling, drugs, or alcohol.
Yep.
So there's that addiction that you need to feed as well, then you've got that incentive or pressure to commit fraud. Now, the next one is opportunity. So there has to be an opportunity for somebody. So now he's got this need or the want to commit fraud because he needs the money or he wants the money. But of course, if there's not an opportunity to commit fraud, then the others falls on the buy side because then there's nothing there. Now, opportunity will present itself if there's no control systems in place whatsoever. Now, I found in the past smaller businesses tend to overlook this. And your bigger companies, they've got the controls, but there might be gaps in the control system. Now, if you provide somebody that's got the incentive or the pressure to commit for the opportunity to do it, then they'll do it. So another one of the opportunities, you've got the controls, but suddenly a person that's part of that control system leaves the business, and there isn't somebody that replaces that one in time. And then lastly, your attitude or your rationalism of the actual fraud to be committed. Now, for example, somebody feels that they were entitled to a bigger bonus than they received, so they made up the difference. So that's their rationale. Or saying, well, cooking the books or creative accounting is not fraud, it's just sort of bending the rules a bit. Now, you get two sorts of people. You get well, a lot of sorts, but in this scenario, you get the very arrogant type of people that's got an entitlement to things, and then somebody that rationalizes it. So you rationalize it, for example, by saying, well, I don't have the money to pay the school fees this month, but next month I'm going to get the bonus and then I'll put the money back. So now they rationalize it. And people's moral compasses differ. What for me might be right might for somebody else be fine. Now, if you have these three, so you've got the incentive or the pressure, and you've got the opportunity, and you are able to rationalize it, or your attitude, then chances are, well, I almost want to say 100% that you're going to have problems in this situation. So that's something to look out for in one's current business. And it's a bit of a difficult thing, because that means that inherently you don't trust people or the people within you, but you can still trust them, but one needs to make sure that you are there and follow up and do your things. You know, I'm a very skeptic person over the years, and I've even become more skeptic, but that doesn't mean I don't like a person or don't really trust them, but I'll still check up just to make sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and with good reason. I feel the same, Jaco, definitely. But listen, it must be hard to kind of spot the red flags when it comes to something like this, because it's usually a very, very nice accounting lady or a person who you would never think could do something like this, and you only find out when they stole R1 million from you or 2 million rand from you. So what are the red flags that one has to look out for?
Yeah, it's normally those people that has been working for a long time, and I regularly hear the people say, I can't believe it. I would have never expected it from that individual. Now, firstly, to look at the red flags, the way that I've broken it up is sort of 3 different categories. On the one side, to say that you're now a business owner and you've got people in top management. So what are the things that you need to look out for in their behavior in top management? Then you've got your general staff or your staff, and then sort of just general things to look out for, irrespective of that person is now part of management or part of staff. So from management side, if the person manages by crisis, now what that means is whenever a payment needs to be made, it has to be done now, because everything is always a crisis and everything is always urgent. So there's not time to follow the proper processes and the controls that's actually in place. So we call it managed by crisis. So look a bit about that, and then of course the person, as a result of that managing by crisis, tends to override internal controls. So although the internal controls are there, they override it, and they always have an excuse for doing that. And then as well, if you see signs of incompetency increasing, now what that means shortly is just to say that the person keeps on making mistakes. Now, those mistakes might not necessarily be mistakes. It might be deliberate, but when he's caught out, he says, she just says, I'm terribly sorry. I don't know where my head was at. I'm making this mistake or that mistake. It's not a mistake. It might be intentional. And then demanding personal loyalty from its subordinates. Now, we did an investigation where we found that one of the management individuals was paying the staff members bonuses out of their own account. And what they were telling that staff members were that, no, but the other directors are being unnecessarily difficult and they don't realize your value, whereas I do, therefore I'm going to be paying that out of my account. But of course, by doing that, he created loyalty. So even if there were scenarios that they would have otherwise not been sure or said, but hang on, this is not right, they now feel that this person in management is sort of their savior and their hero and they can't do anything wrong. So yeah, have a bit about that. Then from a staff, now if the staff feels that management is intolerable to excuses. So in other words, and I mean, we know that as bosses we are strict and we want the best of our staff, but the reality is that if that staff member feels that they're never allowed to make a mistake, they then would tend to, or in certain circumstances, wish to sort of correct that mistake. So now they've made a payment, for argument's sake, to supplier A, but it was never supposed to go to supplier A. Now they make the payment to supplier A, but supplier A now goes bankrupt or they don't want to repay, but they're too scared to tell their boss that. So then what they do is they take money from somewhere else to pay supplier B, who was actually supposed to get that money. Now they realize, oh, it's actually easier than I thought and I wasn't caught out. And as a result of that, they might steal for their own pocket. Or, in fact, they start now rolling the money. And then again, as soon as the opportunity is then there, what we spoke about, and if that need of incentive is created, then they'll start doing that. Another one is volunteering to rewrite or reproduce documents for neatness. Have a look at that. And then inclination to cover up inefficiency or problems with the deception or lies. That comes back to the other one that we spoke about. And then, of course, if you've got an unexpected resignation of some of your key employees, if somebody suddenly just says, "Now I've had enough, I'm resigning," go and have a look at what that person was busy with and what they were doing, because they might have slipped up somewhere and now decide they're going to head for the hills and you don't really know where they are going to or anything like that. And then just if we talk general, your exorbitant lifestyles, expensive houses or holidays or expensive school for the kids and that sort of thing. I mean, that's why you get the lifestyle audits that is quite in the news the last couple of months, I suppose years as well, where the government does lifestyle audits. That's specifically to that. Then, like we spoke about earlier, your substance abuse or gambling. I assisted a client a while back where somebody was being accused of fraud, a family member of theirs. And I started talking to them and I just asked them, I said, "Do you know if this person has a gambling problem?" They said yes. And then I knew that we were in trouble.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, because you have to feed that. And how do you do it? Untaken leave. So if you've got an employee that doesn't take leave at all. Now, it sounds funny because when I started out, before I married a teacher, I never used to go on leave. And until I did this, and I realized, well, somebody might say, well, what's going on here? But if you think about it, if somebody doesn't want to take a leave, it might be because they are too scared that whoever has to take over their duties for that time is going to find out what they're busy
with.
So, yeah, employee not taking leave isn't always a good thing. Then compensation tied to performance, which is actually very sad because it's a good way of running a business to sort of incentivize an employee to work harder if you tie the performance to compensation. But the reality is as well is that in itself creates an opportunity for it. So now they might want to increase the turnover or the figures at least because they're going to get a bigger bonus. I mean, we saw the JSE listed company and the international company where allegedly the financials were overstated, and look at what happened there. Then confusion exists as to duties and responsibilities. Just quick example on that. we did an investigation where there was 3 tiers of control. So the first person needed to put a stamp on it to say that the person checked that the work was done. The next one had to put a stamp to say verified, and the last one had to put a stamp on to say authorized. So we asked the first person, we said, well, you've put your stamp on it to say check, but what did you check? And the individual said, no, I checked that I received the paper, not that the work was done. And the next one we spoke about and said, so verified, why did you put your stamp on to say verified? So no, verified that the first person had put the stamp on it and verified that the VAT was worked out correctly. And the last person that had authorized, we said, so what did you authorize? He said, no, you authorized that there was 2 stamps. Now, if that happens, you have a control in place in theory, but you don't. So now people say, well, they're not really sure what they're supposed to be doing. So make sure in that regard that everybody knows what their roles and responsibilities are. Then hostility towards opposing views. If somebody becomes hostile just because somebody has another view or sees it in another light, have a look a bit about that as well. And then low morale or job dissatisfaction. So look at your employees, see how their morale is and that sort of thing, because again, that could be an sort of an eye on the incentivification or what that we spoke about earlier, or the pressure that created there. And then frequent presence by staff members in other areas. So why are they there? What's happening there? So just have a look at these sort of general things. So the reality is one must just open up your mind and look at these things, because sometimes it's there underneath your nose.
Okay, Jaco, and what would you say are the high-risk areas that you found is the most susceptible to fraud?
So one of the older things that I'm not sure how much it still is in today's business, but petty cash. In the years past, when petty cash was used regularly, that was something that could easily be jumped out, but it's because it's merely a piece of paper that somebody would write in to take the money. So that's always a big risk. So have a look at that. And then expense claims from staff. So a staff member will say that he had a 2-day conference that he needed to attend to, and he paid for the accommodation, when actual fact it was only for a day. Then he'll change the invoice on a computer and submit it for 2 days. Or I saw once where he actually changed the slips of the restaurants, where he increased those, and we found it on his computer. So expense claims, make sure and have a look at that and follow up. And then the big one is your payment of vendors, your invoices, like you said when we started about the university employee. So that happens quite often. So what people will do is they'll, when they create a vendor on a system or a beneficiary on the bank account, they'll either do one or 2 things. Either they'll create a fictitious vendor in totality. So let's say they say that there's 2 cleaning companies that offer services. You've got cleaning company A and cleaning company B. But in actual fact, there's only one cleaning company A. So the person that approves and authorizes it, he says, here's the vendor, it's created on the system, here's the supporting documents, but then in actual fact that vendor doesn't exist. Or what they will do is they'll change the bank account details of that vendor. So if you approve the payment, you're thinking that you are approving vendor A, let's say for argument's sake for stationery, whatever the case may be, and payment, but the payment actually goes to the employee. Now, what they're normally doing there is they roll the money, because that vendor will, of course, after month 2 start crying if he hasn't received his money. Now, if the same person that's creating vendors is the same person that works with your creditors, then it's easy. because then he sort of tells them, I'm very sorry, we'll pay you next month, that sort of thing. And then when money comes in, he or she just uses money that was supposed to go to another vendor to go to this vendor again. And that's, of course, as well why these money increases. And yeah, it's a snowball effect. I mean, it's actually, it gets very, very bad. We found in sometimes where it's millions and millions of rands. And then, of course, you get instances where the EFT payments yes, and I saw once where a lady paid herself 3 million rand in 3 days. It was very weird.
No, that's a bit too much.
Yeah, sometimes the fraudsters, they are clever, and other times they're just so arrogant, they just blatantly do it.
Yeah.
And then maintenance contracts in big factories as well. So for argument's sake, you'll have a tractor that needs fixing. So they bring in the tractor and they say, no, this engine isn't working. They strip the engine and then they send it off to be fixed. Once the engine is outside, the supplier, along with the person inside, tells the company, no, but this engine is totally broken, we need to replace it. And then all they do is they clean the engine, wrap it up, and send exactly the same engine back. Now, the way that we caught them out in one of the investigations I did way back is we color-coded the engine in a place where you couldn't see it. And if memory serves me right, not to exaggerate, but if I remember correctly, that same engine resurfaced 5 times. So it's crazy. So have a look at that. Those are the thing. And then just sort of lastly for the, let's call it the would-be fraudsters out there. A lot of time you get into a fork in the road where you need to decide whether you're going to do the right thing or the wrong thing. If you do that wrong thing once, it just snowballs. And like my dad used to tell me, he said, never try to correct a mistake with another mistake. If you're in financial difficulties, rather speak to your employer or speak to family members, because it's going to be a lot easier to explain that you are running into financial difficulties than it is to explain to your kids why you've just been sentenced to 15 years in prison.
Yeah.
And prison is a joke. So to the employers out there, have a look out, keep your eyes open. To the would-be fraudsters, don't do it. It's not worth it. We will catch you out.
Jaco, just one question from my side. I'm just wondering, let's say you've got this lovely accounting lady now, and now you're discovering things that you shouldn't. What do you do? I mean, you probably feel like confronting her right away, but that's probably not the thing to do. So what do you do? Do you get evidence? Do you call the police? What do you say would be the best thing to do?
Yeah, look, the best isn't to immediately confront them, because in reality is people who admit that they have stolen 10 rand has probably stolen 100,000 rand, or that's why they're admitting to 10 rand. And if you can't get them out quick enough, then they might even go a step further and destroy evidence. So the best thing is to keep quiet for the moment, and if you need to approve payments and that sort of thing, don't approve the payments, but first gather the evidence. And then once that is done, then you can suspend them and go a step further to try and investigate these things. So it's normally better to get in forensic investigators and accountants to assist, because the reality is we know where to look. That's the thing. So, but if you're a very small business and you feel like you can't afford it, the other question that you need to ask yourself is the time that it's going to take me to investigate this myself, what's the costs of that going to be? But I wouldn't immediately confront them with them. First find the evidence, and then, of course, take away the keys to the purse, but do it in such a way that they don't immediately realize it.
Yeah, don't make it too obvious, like that woman who paid herself 3 million in 3 days. Like, it's not raising any red flags. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. The audacity, that's insane. But anyway, Jaco,
sure.
yeah.
No, we are one. I want to say, and in that instance, when you look at the bank statements and you see the references her name, then that's something different. I mean, then you take away the powers to the bank account immediately, and you suspend them. But again, on suspension, remember there's still labor laws that you need to follow. So you can't just stand up there and shout "you thief" and chase the person away. Then you're going to be in trouble again for the labor laws.
Yeah.
So it's best to call in specialists always.
Exactly, yeah. You can't just chase them away. They've also got rights, even though they're wrong. Jaco, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us today. And how do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. You can visit us on our website, www.hahnlaw.co.za, and LinkedIn. You can pop us a message in there as well, and we'll get in touch.
We appreciate your time and your knowledge, Jaco. Until next time, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ian. All the best.
You too. Thank you.
Are you or your business in trouble and struggling to find a solution? Call Hahn & Hahn Attorneys as we assist clients in finding solutions. We specialize in consumer and food law, commercial and construction law, forensic investigations, and administrative law. Visit hahnlaw.co.za. That's HAHN. We assist clients nationwide. Hahn & Hahn Attorneys, because we care. Don't miss Legal Talk with Hahn & Hahn Attorneys, Wednesday mornings at 10 on eRadio.